What's going on, everybody? It's that time again. The AllSooners Podcast, episode 176 on this Wednesday, March 1st, 2023. March feels good. Josh Callaway in Oklahoma City, John Hoover in Tulsa, Ryan Chapman and more. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
Awesome. Can't wait. Boy, we got some controversy at the top of the softball poll. We got some got the baseball team starting to heat up a little bit. We'll get get to that in the last segment. But man, football never quits.
Well, the Diamond Sports ran so that they took all the power and excitement out of basketball season.
Basketball has hit as low of a point as it's had for both combined. We'll get there later. But yeah, thankfully football's right around the corner. 3 weeks from today, spring practice. 3 weeks. The countdown is on. And yeah, Diamond Sports are turning a little bit of a corner. So there's some excitement floating around. Just feels good that it's March. That's a corner being turned just in the calendar. You get through February. They made February shorter for a reason. It stinks. So we turn the corner. We're on to March. Good things are ahead. And we press on. So we got coming up here, like we said, 3 weeks till spring ball. We're in that full-blown kind of off-season waiting for spring football where the conversations pop up, random things. We're going to talk about the spring game a little bit because we got a little bit of news there. But first, let's talk about Joe Castiglione, athletic director at the University of Oklahoma, was on with Toby Rowland, voice of the Sooners, on his radio show. Said some interesting stuff. We had a few stories about some of the things that he said on allsooners.com with a full recap. You can go check that out. One of the things he mentioned, and I wanted to get your guys' reaction to it off the top here, stadium capacity for Gaylord family, Oklahoma Memorial Stadium, staying put. He was pretty... He clarified it later on Twitter to make it not sound quite as stark as it sounded, the quote did when he was on the air. But basically, what Joe Castiglione articulated was the stadium capacity is fine. We don't need to get bigger in the SEC just because we're going to the SEC to try and match. What we should be worrying about is making just the stadium better and the fan experience better coming up. What do you guys think about that? Because it is something that gets talked about, is the fact that those SEC stadiums, a lot of them are bigger than Gaylord family, which is obviously the second biggest in the Big 12 currently. It'll be like a seventh or something, and yeah, it's a lot lower. What do we think of that? Is that the right move for Oklahoma to not worry about expanding the stadium, at least right now?
Yeah, I think it's the right move. I think it's smart. I think it's pragmatic to take a measured approach into the membership to the SEC. I think I tallied it up, and the current configuration, 82,112 or something like that, would be ninth in the SEC. Now, nobody at Oklahoma wants to be ninth in anything.
Yeah.
But if you're going to be ninth, this is the thing to be ninth in, because a lot of those SEC stadiums, they fill up early. They are just absolutely crazy all throughout the game. The students don't leave at halftime. You know what I mean? Oklahoma's got some things to address. And I don't mean the school or Joe Castiglione. I mean the fan base has some things to address. How loud do you want to be? How crazy do you want to be? Don't do like LSU and try to injure anybody, right? I mean, we're not talking felony here, right? But just in terms of crazy, loud, obnoxious, not throwing things, but it being in tune with the light show that's going on, being in tune with who's in the crowd, what celebrities may be on the stadium board that are on the field. That just sometimes the OU fans are just not dialed in to what's going on. And sometimes OU, we've said this before on the podcast, sometimes OU rolls out a promotion at just the absolute tone-deaf wrong time of the game. That happens frequently at OU. So if they can put those two things together, the fan base being more dialed into the urgency of what's going on, the school being more dialed into the urgency of the situation maybe on the field, hold off on your promotions or your presentations for just a smidge. It's okay if you don't get to all of them. If those two things can happen, then Oklahoma can be what Bob Stoops used to say it's not enough of, which is an absolute snake pit. Remember, that's not my words. That's Bob Stoops years ago saying, yeah, our fans could be a lot better. This isn't exactly a snake pit when the other teams come in here. So that changed a little bit on, 2008, the Texas Tech game, when everybody decided to jump around. That needs to happen more frequently, and I don't know exactly how to make that happen.
Well, Bob Stoops had to challenge the fans for that to happen, too. Remember that. That was not a organic. You think of the great atmospheres this stadium's had the last couple of years. That was not organic. The fans had to get challenged because, frankly, for an 85-plus thousand seat stadium, the atmosphere kind of sucks. If you look at big-time atmospheres across the rest of college football, we're in those a lot because we travel. You get up for big games, doesn't get up for every single game. And that's part of why Oklahoma's going to the SEC, right? Is that no one's stoked for Iowa State. We'll see in 20 years, are people still stoked for Mississippi State? I think it'll help in the short term. But I think, too, when you look at it, also, last little bit on that. Remember how after the UTEP game, we were like in awe of the atmosphere of, oh my God, the fans stayed for almost all 4 quarters and they were loud and they were juiced because they're happy for Brent. We had to remark at that because that's not what happens in Norman. So just remember that. And but also,
it's gotten better. It's gotten better. Yeah. Would you say over the years since Bob held the fans' feet to the fire in 2008, called them out and said, "Be there." Lincoln started doing that. Bob did it a couple more times. Brent certainly does it every chance he gets. I think that matters, but that shouldn't have to be that way, right?
Well, it's also as Oklahoma has gotten. The wins have been there, but it's less and less dominant as like they're playing close games at home all the way through, and the fans have to stick around, have to stay. Plus, like the light show, things like that. The crowd was pretty good all year this last year. Why? Because OU was in a dogfight like every single game outside of the UTEP game. So, chicken or egg thing there. If you want to be the fans or hey, you're not getting exciting stuff, that'll all work itself out. But 2, take a step back. Not an Oklahoma issue. Across college football, attendance has dropped. That's been it feels like every year The Athletic or someone rolls a story out of attendance dropped again, all that stuff. And so what have a lot of schools done? There's not the big arms race rush to expansion. The arms race is how do we take the existing facility that we have and make it as comfortable and as appealing for a game day experience for a fan to come in, as opposed to saying, I've got a 75-inch TV on my wall. I've got 4K. Hey, everybody, why don't you come over? You guys bring all the food. I'll host. It's way cheaper to do that. Like, how do you fight that battle? And I think that that's the right mindset from Oklahoma, and you've seen a ton of that. And I think they've done a lot of good stuff with putting money into the stadium that makes it just more accessible, more fun to be in. You look at, like, Oklahoma State. They're doing that exact same thing right now with Boone Pickett. I think that's just kind of the arms race for expansion for now is over, and I don't think you're going to see a ton of places across the country, SEC or not, just being like, hey, we need to add 20 more seats or 20,000 more seats.
Right. Parking and tailgating is a big part of that. If it's hard to park, people are going to fight against it. People are not going to want to go. That's one reason why Tulsa's attendance has absolutely fallen off the table is it's not pleasant to go down there and park. It's just not. Tailgating at Oklahoma State has blown up. That's why their attendance has gotten better. Oklahoma has kind of resisted some of the tailgating efforts, or at least some of what the fans call tailgating common sense, right?
Yeah.
Some things have gone against what the fans want, and Oklahoma's making money on the side, opening certain lots for certain tailgate events. But Ryan, what you said is right. Oklahoma fights an image problem within their own fan base because Barry Switzer used to say, let's hang half a hundred on their ass by halftime. And he would, and Kansas State or Iowa State or whoever would have no shot in the second half. So it became a tradition for the students to get up and leave and go get sauced at halftime. I mean, yeah, that's Oklahoma's tradition right there for the fans. Nowadays, it's not like that. And not only that, but in 2024, you start bringing in SEC schools. You're not going to be hanging half a hundred on anybody by halftime.
Well, and again, that's also not an OU problem. Like Nick Saban feels like 3 of the last 5 years has gone to war with maybe we need to have less student tickets in Tuscaloosa because those students leave too. So This is not just like an Oklahoma fans thing like that. Like it's across all of sports. Like it's become more and more of you have to find a way to be an entertaining, fun product for the entire experience a fan is there. Why? Because it's so accessible and so easy. These TV deals are big. Why? Because those games are featured prominently on TV with great production, and you just mute the commentators sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the OU fan base needs to improve. I mean, I think we all agree about that. I mean, when we go to these other places that we travel to, with the exception of Nebraska, I mean, they're all smaller than by a lot. Manhattan, Boone Pickens, whatever. and they're all just as loud, if not louder, everywhere we go. And McLean, I mean, all those stadiums are a little more juiced than OU, despite being half the size sometimes in terms of capacity. So there's some improvements there.
Yeah.
You guys remember, I mean, some of
is
these games,
is that an underdog kind of phenomenon, Josh, you think?
I'm sure. I mean, you get everybody's best shot when OU comes in. I would say that's one of the best parts for us covering OU and traveling, is that we get to see everybody's best game day. We get to see their best foot forward, because that's the biggest home game they have of the season, typically. So that's part of it. And I do think the slate being better will help. OU's home game slate every year kind of stinks right now. I think of the really big ones they've had, like when Ohio State came to town, was great. It was great. So maybe that'll help. But I do think that just improving the stadium, generally speaking, has got to come first. I think that goes without saying, because if you guys think, how many times have we seen, I know the Nebraska game was like that in Norman. I think it happened once or twice last year, where fans are saying that concession lines take a full quarter to get through. And, things like that, that it's a nightmare, the bathroom line or whatever. You got to improve that stuff, because that's another thing that dissuades people from going, is that it's a mess. It's like a 4 or 5 hour game. It's one of the few things, and you don't have to, but it's one of the few sports where you really need to hit the concession probably at least once to at least get something to drink. Like, you have to. There's no way around it. So nobody wants to wait for a full quarter to do that kind of thing. You know what I mean? So improvements there have to be made, and we'll see what they have up their sleeves.
With the career that I've had, long time as a sports writer now, I'm not exactly, I don't say this in any standoffish type of way, I'm not exactly a man of the people. I get to the stadium 3 hours before the stadium opens, right? Before people get to come in with their tickets. I sit in the press box, so I'm not in the heat, I'm not in the cold. I have access to drinks and food if you need it, that kind of thing. So it's tough for me to sit here and say, the fans need to do this and the fans need to do that. I get it. I'm not in that group. I've never experienced that. I've gone to games around here and there as a fan. One of the worst experiences I had was at a school up here, 11th and Harvard. Spent an hour of the football game standing in line to get a hot dog and a water. The water was warm, the hot dog was cold, and I said, that's it. Never again am I coming here as a fan. Why would you do that? So if people are having bad experiences as fans, even moderate experiences, I totally get it. But I'm not one to sit here and be able to judge on that stuff.
That's just makes it, that's what makes it so hard for athletic departments, because it's like, okay, you've got this finite amount of money, and now with NIL, your donors can say, well, do I want to give it to the university, or do I want to go to a collective, or do my own deal? So your inflow is probably going to be less just from pure fundraising on a normal year when the fan base is juiced, like Oklahoma's. Obviously, they're going to blow through all the records. So it's like, okay, what do you want? Do you put that money into off the field stuff that fans are not going to see, but matters a ton for recruiting and quality of life of the players? How much do you put that into the stadium as far as capacity, versus how do you make it a juiced, fun environment all the time, regardless of, like, that's the one thing in your conference schedule. Once Oklahoma's locked in and the SEC starts rotating through, if they get on a 5-year cycle where 2 of those 4 years, everyone on the schedule sucks, there's nothing anyone can do about that. Right. And so how do you fight that? You have a fun product yourself as far as what's on the field, and you have a fun product in the stadium. And that's what I think Oklahoma is rightly focused on, as opposed to just hey, this is a cool number to put in our media guide. There's 100,000 seats on this.
And don't forget, Joe got here as the athletic director when the stadium capacity was 75,000 and the annual or the weekly attendance was like 55,000. There were 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 empty seats at home games sometimes. Unattractive opponents and a bad product on the field leads to a lot of empty seats. As an athletic director, you'd much rather have a high percentage of your capacity filled than have 100,000 seats and you look up in the corners and there's 20,000 empty seats. What's the point of that if you're only going to put 85,000? And he invoked the population of the state of Oklahoma. Yeah, that's a big part of it. But there's I think the largest OU alumni fan base is in Dallas, or maybe the second largest to Oklahoma City is in Dallas. So that's a short drive. If you build it, they will come. But now they're in a period of transition with a new coach coming off a 6 and 7 season. Do you really want to sink that much money into the program to expand the stadium at this point in time, coming off a 6 and 7 season? So, yeah, no, it's very smart right now to stand pat with the attendance.
That's a good point. They did add also to the attendance recently. I mean, whenever I first started attending University of Oklahoma, it wasn't a full bowl. It was, obviously the corners were empty over there. So, I mean, they did add recently. So maybe give a little time, see how things go. But, yeah, improving the stadium overall, I think, comes first. Just build a dome. Just put a roof on it and make it a dome. That's the answer here. That everybody's on.
What would you call it, the Switzer Dome?
Ooh, I like it.
I don't like that, huh?
Yeah, why not? Let's do it. Let's just go full Cowboy Stadium in Norman, basically.
Make that happen and keep the light show going. The light show is good.
It'd be even better. We do like lasers and stuff.
Yeah, we poo-pooed it a little bit, or at least I poo-pooed it a little bit at the start of last season, and by the first night game, we're like, nope, hand up, wrong. It mattered. Fans loved it.
And the players loved it, didn't they?
Yeah,
I mean, they talked about it. Every time you'd bring it up in interviews on Monday and Tuesday, they'd be like, oh, yeah, it was awesome. I've never seen anything like that. That was so cool. It's the best atmosphere I've ever been in. So, again, congratulations to everybody for getting it to this point. Just needs to go a little bit further now that you're in the SEC.
What struck me about that, too, was the guys who had transferred. I distinctly remember Eric Gray being like, yeah, a lot of the SEC teams do that. Yeah. And I was like, okay, didn't even know that. So, Oklahoma catching up, I guess, because he was the one guy that week who was like, yeah, it was cool. Well, he was like, I've been in like 10 games like that, though. So, interesting as they continue to beef that up. Another thing that Joe C said, and we already pretty much knew this, but reaffirms it, confirms it, whatever, however you want to phrase it. Kyler Murray statue coming during the spring game. Now, obviously, we had the Baker Mayfield statue last year. It was an absolute scene. Now, it's so hard to define that line of how much of the scene was because of Baker, who's one of the most beloved players of all time at OU, and the fact that it was Brent's first game, or, first spring game, first chance for the fans to really go see him, on the sidelines. Because it was the biggest, well-attended spring game of any in the country last year. So my question to you guys is this. Is there any chance, that OU can replicate what they did last year for Kyler and for Brent Venables year 2? Because it seems like it'd be really, really hard.
Yeah, no chance. We're not going to see 75,000 people in the stadium next month. Since it's March 1st, I can say that now, next month.
Yeah.
The red-white game will not be sold out. There will not be 200 former players on the sidelines. First and foremost, it's the spring game. That's a hard sell. 2, the newness of Brent Venables did kind of wear off because it's now his second season. It's his second spring game, so that newness factor is gone. 3, they're coming off a 6 and 7 season, and I'm sorry, I've told you guys this before. I don't like to read the comments, but I read the comments. And there are people out there, not a lot of them, and not smart, but they're out there, who aren't pleased with the direction of the program. You go 6 and 7 at Oklahoma, you're going to agitate a lot of people. So I think people are going to say, yeah, well, we'll see what he does this fall. I'm not going out sitting in the spring game, high winds, tornadoes, rain, 90-degree sun, whatever. I'm not going to go do that because I'm going to see what they're going to do this fall. And then the Kyler factor, he's a little less popular than Baker, let's be honest. Baker is for this fan base, Baker is the man.
Yeah, the honeymoon period's over. The thing you didn't mention, Josh, though, I don't think it was Brent Venables. I don't think it was Baker Mayfield. Oklahoma fans had 2 chances in person to throw the double birds to Lincoln Riley. Chance number 1 was to show up at Max Westheimer and put a bunch of people at an airport when USC did the Mecca of college football stuff, and we've all seen the Coliseum and how it doesn't fill up, things like that. That was Oklahoma fans' first chance. Then it was the spring game. It was a spite. I'm in love with Oklahoma. Brent Venables to sit. Like, all of those things. Like, I'm sorry, Baker, and I'm sorry, Brent. It was more about that than it was about either of you individually. And, yeah, I mean, Kyler Murray was the starting quarterback for 1 year. He's a quiet guy. Didn't have the hero origin story of I'm an Oklahoma fan growing up, and I just said, screw it, I'm going to walk on, all that stuff. Like that's the Baker Mayfield experience. Kyler didn't lose a game in high school. People thought he was arrogant in his dealings with Kevin Sumlin at Texas A&M. He showed that maybe there was something to the not trusting Kevin Sumlin, because Lincoln Riley obviously in 1 year made him a superstar. So Kyler Murray proved himself right there, and then head off to the NFL. People love him, but it's not a Baker Mayfield love. I'm just more interested in, frankly, last year, Baker coming in. Who've talked about this a ton. It was a time that maybe Oklahoma fans needed Baker to come in and say, Brent's your guy, everything's good. And Baker needed Oklahoma fans to be like, nope, you're still walking on water here in Norman after everything he's gone through in his NFL career to that point, the crossroads he was at. Now Kyler Murray has a new head coach. He's going to be injured. We don't know if he's going to be starting the year or even 100% or how quickly he'll get ramped up into things. The word around the league is that no coach wanted to work with Kyler Murray because he's tough. I think Kyler might need a weekend to be like, nope, everything's good. This is what I was. This is what it felt like for the good times, and then head back to Arizona.
Yeah, does everybody still love me? Good, I'm going to Norman.
Yeah, no. Kyler, yeah, I mean, trust me, huge Kyler fan. I really like, for my money, his 2018 season goes right up against anybody that OU's had. I mean, if you're talking about give me one quarterback for one season, it's hard. Kyler is in the conversation for me for number one. But, yeah, you can't match the Baker love. And last year was the absolute perfect storm for all the things we just said. I mean, it was all these factors into one, and they went out for this humongous spring game attendance number, and it's just hard to imagine they could do that again. Now, if they do, I think we'll all sit here on the recap show, the post-game show, and we'll tip our cap big time if they can come even close to putting 75,000 or whatever it was in the seats again. But yeah, hard to imagine that. I will say another thing though. I don't know how much it's going to get that many OU fans, but it might help a little. This is the first chance to see Jackson Arnold, who is very popular. Clearly, we can see website traffic on anything that we put Jackson Arnold's name on. OU fans love that guy, and this will be his first time suiting up. So this is a chance to see him. And I think if OU, I don't know if they would do it, but how great would it be if it's the red-white game and Dylan Gabriel's quarterback of Team Red and Jackson Arnold's quarterback of Team White? That would be awesome. That has a little bit of juice to it. I'd like to see that. So that might help. But yeah, the number that they got last year, hard to imagine.
They don't. They came out last year. Another factor was Dylan Gabriel's first time to suit up. Remember, transfer from UCF. Oh boy, let's see what this left-hander's about. So some of that worked in his favor, worked in the team's favor. He didn't have a great day throwing the football on a windy day. But Ryan, great point on the Lincoln Riley factor. People showed up to say, "Here's to you, Lincoln."
Yeah.
And they did that last year, and now a lot of those people are probably going to say, "No, I flipped my double birds last year. I'm good. I'll wait till the fall."
Especially when Lincoln Riley was Caleb Williams' hamstring blowing up away from potentially being in the college football playoff. I mean,
nobody wants to admit that.
That's very true. Nobody thought he was going to have that year that they did. Yep. So we'll see. The big question is just, will Kyler Murray's statue have two of the correct feet? That's the big question. We'll be examining it very, very closely. I would imagine that there's going to be extra special attention paid to the feet this time around if they're using the same sculptor or whatever. I
would hope so. That was so weird.
Is it going to be shorter than the other statues? Like just by a little bit? Like not too much shorter, but just like tastefully shorter than the other ones? That's another thing to look at.
Can they somehow get his pose where he's like doing the little leap over the goal line?
Into the end zone, yeah.
That'd be sick. I don't know how that might be really hard in statue form, but that'd be good. That'd be good. So we'll see.
Throwing it past to Grant Calcaterra. That's how I'd have it.
Tom Herman's like, please no. God, no. I can't. Nightmares.
What a crazy season. That was a fun season. Kyler's one season was awesome. But yeah, what a career for him. Cool that he'll have the statue. I look forward to seeing that, and we'll see what kind of turnout they can get as far as the former players. That was another thing you mentioned. There was like every former player ever, it felt like, was at that game of note. It was nuts. So we'll see. It's coming up next month. Spring ball in 3 veeks, and we'll see Brent Venables. I'm sure that one of the first things he'll say at that first spring conference is everybody needs to be there. Start doing that whole thing again. So we'll see what Oklahoma can do next month. All right, we'll take a time out here. We'll come back.
Speaking of former players, real quick, we'll go to the break with this. Creed Humphrey is going to be honored on Saturday at Shawnee High School. I guess they're going to have a pep assembly in the gymnasium or something, and he's going to show up. So, yeah, that's cool. Good for Creed. to celebrate Creed Humphrey's Super Bowl championship. That's awesome.
Shawnee Wolves, I think, legend,
Yep.
I believe. Yes. So shout out. Good, nice baseball facilities out there. That's where they always have the state tournaments for the small schools in Shawnee. Shout out Creed. All right, we'll take a time out. Come back. A little NFL draft stuff to talk about. Combine is this week, so we'll talk about that a little bit. What guys need to have a big week in Indy. And also, spring ball starts in 3 weeks. What transfers next season are going to be the biggest impact? Talk about that a little bit next as well, right here on the AllSooners podcast. On Twitter, you can follow AllSooners at @all_Sooners. Ryan's @ Ryan Chapman. Hooves at John E. Hoover. I'm at Josh M. Callaway. Our website is allsooners.com. We're a Fan Nation affiliate, part of the Sports Illustrated Network. All right, segment 2 here on the AllSooners podcast. John Hoover, Ryan Chapman, Josh Callaway. Spring ball starts in 3 weeks. We mentioned that earlier. 3 weeks from today, first spring practice. So get your mind right. Get a little bit of time. Get your affairs in order. And then we're going to be hitting it hard for about a month there. Open practices that we find out about an hour in advance, I'm sure, like last year maybe. We'll see how that all goes. The season, obviously, coming up in just about 6 months from now. So last week on the show, we talked a little bit about what transfers we were excited to see for the first time in spring practice, put on the pads, and just kind of see what they look like, basically, in person. Let's spin that forward into the season real quick. Who are the guys that are definitely going to have a big year in your guys' mind? Who needs to wait a little bit? And who's more of a down-the-road impact? Who is the biggest impact transfer that Oklahoma got going into next season?
Okay, so I'm going to pick a couple here. Ryan, you pick a couple, and it doesn't matter if they overlap. Josh, same thing. Can we eliminate Austin Stogner from this discussion? Because it's kind of a no-brainer that he came back to catch passes. I asked him specifically, hey, you caught 20 passes last year, South Carolina. Braden Willis blew up. You watched from afar. Is that one of the reasons why you came back? And he goes, yeah, to play in this offense. Yeah. So big year coming for Austin Stogner for sure. The story that I wrote this morning that just published this afternoon or earlier this morning on AllSooners is on the wide receiver from Michigan, Andrell Anthony. Ryan, you got a chance to get some FaceTime with him. I FaceTimed with him as well. I say FaceTime, I'm talking face-to-face interviews. This was a couple of weeks ago when they made everybody available. I was blown away. Maybe not blown away, but very impressed with how convicted he was that he was going to make an immediate impact, have a lasting impact. He's going to be a good teammate. He's going to do everything they ask him to do. He's going to work hard. He's going to keep his head down, and he wants to come in and use his athletic ability, right, to make that impact. I kind of see that happening after talking with him and after listening to the full 30, 35-minute conversation that you guys had, that everybody had with him. I kind of see that happening. I see him. He talked about Drake Stoops being kind of a mentor, a big brother. It's a big brother program, and I just got to presume it's something that the Soul Mission created, the big brother. Hey, you're newcomer. You got a big brother. His name is, and in this case, it's Drake Stoops. So that's really cool. And then the slam dunk for me is obviously Dasan McCullough. I think he's going to come in. I think he's going to be a spectacular player. He's got height, length, reach, with the arms. He looks like an NFL prospect right now. And then you spend a couple of minutes with him, talk to him, get to know him a little bit, and he's even more impressive. Very, comes from he's a coach's kid, comes from a football background, a football family. I will be shocked if he's not like an all Big 12 type contender, second team, first team, all Big 12 type player by the end of the season.
Yeah. And on the Andrell Anthony thing too, we sit in this interview setting with, basically all the players throughout the year. And the one thing that really stuck out to me, if you go back, his recruitment, what little production he had at Michigan, but when he was used, the big, buzzword, whatever, was talking about his speed, which absolutely. But what stuck out to me is Andrell Anthony's arms. He has a ton of length. He's a very long, lanky guy. And I was trying to think back to last year and just out of the wide receiver room specifically, like Jaden Gibson's one of those guys, but we didn't see a ton of him as a young guy. Nick Anderson as well, injured. The only guy that really contributed that had that to him was Theo Weiss. Otherwise, it's Marvin Mims not super long. Then this year you're looking at Drake Stoops, Jalil Farouk, Gavin Freeman, those guys. It's just a different body type. So I think that'll give him an advantage trying to make a larger impact at Oklahoma than he did at Michigan, just because he's something different that Oklahoma doesn't have a ton of. So I'll be interested to see there. McCullough, yeah, I think that's the layup as well. I'm going to cheat a little bit. Bill Connolly did a really good job. He does a lot of stats and stuff, S&P Plus for ESPN. He did a deep dive on what position groups make the biggest impact via the transfer portal. Linebacker on defense was one of those, so that tracks with McCullough. And offensive tackles have a pretty high hit rate by kind of his metrics. And so a guy that I think may fade to the background a little bit through spring football, Walter Rouse, coming from Stanford, because he's got that labrum injury. We're not going to see him out on the field in the spring game, things like that. Might be easy to forget about, but that's a veteran guy who he was heading into last year. He was, I'm going to the NFL. I'm going to the NFL. It's happening. He didn't finish his biomechanical engineering degree, 1 or 2 classes he had left behind intentionally, because he's like, I'm going to circle back after my NFL career, fix those up. He's going to be a really smart guy that can come in. He'll be able to digest the playbook. He's a veteran. That's not what you're worried about. And he talked, too, about a lot of the technique things that Bill Bedenbaugh's already pointed out to him. I think he's someone that's going to be able to mentally translate that while he's off the field of saying, I need to do this, I need to do that, and then be able to roll that forward in the summer and fall. So I think that Stogner notwithstanding on the offensive side, obviously, like we talked about, Walter Rouse is going to be a big piece of that offensive line.
Yeah, McCullough and Stogner are a couple of slam dunks. Certainly, I think. You have a need with Deshaun White moving on in that cheetah spot. McCullough seems perfect for it. And then Stogner, tight end 1, filling right in for Braden Willis, the familiarity. We talked about that last week, how excited he is to be back. He seems like the obvious move. A couple other ones that I'll toss in. Rondell Bothroyd from Wake Forest. Defensive end room, we did the report card series and everything. Not great. It was disappointing. Ethan Downs, Reggie Grimes, those guys didn't have the seasons that we were kind of anticipating or thought they might. So adding him to the mix there, he might really improve, that room with Miguel Chavis. Excited to see what he looks like. A pretty well-established career already, right under his belt at Wake Forest. Played a lot of football, so he's a big one. Then I would throw too. I'm a little guilty of this myself, kind of forgetting about him a little bit. But Reggie Pearson from Texas Tech. Yeah. The guy clearly can hit. We saw what he did to Dylan Gabriel, about destroyed him pretty much on that trick play in overtime. The safeties room is kind of, Billy Bowman is Billy Bowman, but Justin Broyles is obviously gone, so that clears up some snaps. You still have Key Lawrence. Peyton Bowen's here now. People think he might be ready. Where does Reggie Pearson fit into that? It feels like he's going to be a guy who, and he's used to the conference. Not that I don't know how much to put in that, but he's played a lot of these teams before, right, obviously, and been to these stadiums for the most part. So I think he's going to be a fun one to watch as well. And just the fact that they have somebody on the back end of their defense that other teams have to think about, like, this guy will smoke you, on a deep ball over the middle or whatever. I think that's a little something that's kind of been lacking for Oklahoma. They don't really have anybody that I would consider like a hard hitter in the back end of the defense in a while. And that seems to be the book on Pearson. So I throw him in the mix there too.
I like Pearson, Josh, and I like Bothroyd as well to both come in and make an immediate impact. Bothroyd, again, another one of those guys, when you talk to him, you understand why he was a priority for the Oklahoma coaching staff, why he was recruited previously by Todd Bates or whoever at Clemson and Venables. The same with Pearson. Pearson has experience at Wisconsin. He was a 2-year starter, 1-year starter at Wisconsin, and then kind of got a weird medical situation where he developed this abnormality, and Wisconsin got real scared and said, we're not clearing you. So he goes and gets 3 different opinions and gets cleared to play college football by everybody except Wisconsin. And he transferred to Texas Tech. Now he's transferring to Oklahoma. So lots going on there. Lots of opportunity for guys to step in and make an immediate impact. I look for everybody that we've talked about here. And I keep hearing good things about Caleb Schaefer from Miami.
Well, and I'm sure that anyone listening to this, whether you're second screening at home, in the car, whatever, you're probably yelling, Trace Ford's here. The question on him is going to be how healthy, like how many snaps can he take on? If the health is there and he looks like the Trace Ford that tore it up early in his career at Oklahoma State, if he moves another year on past some of those major injuries, then absolutely, I think everyone, or at least for me, I'm hesitant to – I don't know what to expect. So I don't know, is he a guy that's going to be able to give Oklahoma 15 good snaps a game? Is he going to be a guy that can give Oklahoma 30 good snaps? Like, I don't know what that's going to look like. And I think that's something that you won't really know probably until Texas, when you've seen about half the season of how high of a level for how many snaps can he play.
Same with Jacob Lacey from Notre Dame. Spent 8 games last year. He played 4 games for the Irish, and they had an open date. He spent the next 8 weeks in the transfer portal. So no mileage on those tires, right? He's not a guy. I asked him specifically. He said, I'm as healthy as I've ever been. So he's a guy that could come in and make an immediate impact as well.
Yeah, Trace Ford, I think he goes to number 1 on this list on November 4th. That game in Stillwater, that's going to be fun. I mean, it's Bedlam anyway. It's the last Bedlam, but that Trace Ford angle is going to be great. We will get him that week in the midweek interviews, assuming he is healthy, hopefully. And he's going to be on one that week. That's going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to seeing what he does. A lot of guys here that could contribute right away, which is exciting, I think, for Oklahoma fans, certainly. So from the guys coming in to the guys who just left, NFL Combine is this week in Indianapolis. Before we talk about that, though, let's real quick pivot over to one guy, Anton Harrison, Mel Kiper. Everybody knows who Mel Kiper is, NFL draft guru. Has Anton Harrison number 13 overall to the Jets. First rounder, I mean, firmly in the first round. Number 13, he was the 3rd tackle off the board, is Anton Harrison. Looks like he's going to be a first rounder. I mean, you guys, it feels like that's the way this is trending. He'd be the first one since 2020 when CeeDee Lamb and Kenneth Murray both went in the first round. Nice little feather in the cap here for Bill Bedenbaugh. He's having himself a nice NFL run with all the guys who had great seasons. And obviously, we just mentioned Creed Humphrey winning the Super Bowl along with Orlando Brown. And now you might add Anton Harrison to the mix here very, very soon.
Yeah. Josh, at some point, these NFL personnel directors and general managers and scouts, they start looking to see who Bill Bedenbaugh has putting out next. You know, they go to Oklahoma and say, okay, well, what about Bedenbaugh? Who's he got coming out? That's the reputation that he's developed, and it's unbelievable. There's not in the history of the NFL college football, there's not a lot of assistant coaches that teams go to and say, we need your input. Who are your best players? Who have you put out lately? Who's coming out next year? You know, that kind of thing. Bedenbaugh's got that kind of cred. Anton Harrison, man. I saw in an earlier mock draft where he was at like 16 or 19 to the Chargers or something like that. I think it's getting to be a pretty consensus opinion that he's a first rounder.
Yeah, Harrison helped a lot by like Olu Fashanu, who was mocked during the season. He's Penn State's tackle. Everyone's like, this is the guy. He'll be the first tackle off the board. He decides to go back to school. And so now you're looking at Skoronski, I think, from Northwestern. Alabama's got a guy in there. But there's not those two are the ones that are currently, hey, either one of those might go. But it doesn't seem like there's this real strong held opinion of like, this guy's the number 1 tackle, this guy's the number 2 tackle, and then you have to hope for a run. Like, this is a big week for Anton Harrison. I think it's the biggest week. Him and Braden Willis are the two that have the most upward ability, I think, at the Combine. Eric Gray and Marvin Mims, I'm sorry. Their teams are looking at your 40 time, and that's going to define where you get drafted. But, like, we know the production at those two positions. It's going to be how fast can you run in a straight line. But Anton Harrison can go in there, and if he has a really good week and impresses some teams in the interviews, he could for sure put himself in that, like he's a first-round tackle, but that higher first round, if the quarterbacks start flying in the top 5 and then a run on tackles happens and the team goes, we got to get Anton Harrison, that could be a big payday for him early on.
Ryan, what do you think Marvin Mims is going to run in the 40?
Not good.
Really?
I just... This may not be fair, but I stood on the field in Morgantown and saw him got run down by a not very athletic West Virginia secondary on a play that should have been a surefire touchdown. And I think that's going to put him in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round, not because he doesn't have ball skills and can't run every route and is explosive. He doesn't have like 4.2, 4.3, that high end speed. And right now what teams are looking for out of their top end wide receivers is they're going hunting for a Justin Jefferson or a Jamar Chase that they can play on rookie money for 3 or 4 years. And And I think that's just going to be the issue with Marvin. I think he's going to step in, be incredibly productive, but as far as draft goes, he's just not 4.5, 4.6, somewhere in there.
I will add this. You're right about the West Virginia observation. It's not fair because it was cold and raining all day, and it was at the end of the game when he got ran down.
But it was also cold and raining for West Virginia's secondary.
True, but I don't remember who made that tackle. Had he been out there, had he played a bunch of plays, had he made a bunch of tackles, I don't know. My point is that when you're at the combine, you've got your little aerodynamic shirt on, and you've got your number right. I mean, it's the surface is totally different. There's no wind, there's no rain. I'm going to predict he runs a 4.42.
We shall see. We shall see. Who is it that has the most to gain in Indy? Is it Marvin Mims? Is it Harrison? And the full list here, if you don't recall, 7 guys: Eric Gray, Marvin Mims, Braden Willis, Anton Harrison, Wanya Morris, Jalen Redmond, and Michael Turk, Mr. Punter. Who has the most to gain? Who needs to step up and deliver in Indy?
I will say the most to gain. I think there are some first rounders in here, and I think there are some free agents in here, but I think the guy who can really show the most, improve his station more than anybody else is Jalen Redmond. Right now they're looking at his film, they're looking at his tape, and they're saying, yeah, the kid can play a little bit. There's no doubt he can play, but we got 2 years missing, 2.5 years missing because of health issues and not injuries necessarily, but health issues. They want to get him in there, and they want to poke him, and they want to prod him, and they want to test him, and they want to look at this, and they want to look at that. I mean, he had the blood clot issues, right? You don't want anything to do with that if you're an NFL team, if there's anything lingering. So if he gets in there and shows everybody, that's not a problem. It's a thing of the past. I've moved past that. I'm a player now. Look at the good side of my film. I think he's got a great upside. I think he could work his way. He came in with 5-star accolades, at least some recruiting services. He could make a move at the combine just by getting to know people, just by getting to meet the scouts and stuff like that. He can make a move probably from undrafted to late second. Probably not second round, third round, early third round, maybe mid third round.
Yeah, if you remember, and this is going to be really, you have to be a college football diehard, but Maurice Hurst, the big defensive tackle that was coming out of Michigan that everyone thought could be a first, second round talent, and then on draft day, he's dropping. We find out, there's some irregularities with heartbeat and blood clotting and things like that. And I think it was like the 5th round when the Raiders finally circled back around and said, yeah, we'll take the shot in the dark on this guy. Like, that is stuff that NFL teams freak out about. And so being able to talk to him, stuff like that. My bigger worry for him is actually just the same conversation we had with Isaiah Thomas last year of early in his career, Redmond was playing on the outside. Then I don't think he was best utilized on the interior, but he had already made that move under Grinch's speed D. And I think Venables and that defense were kind of stuck with him. If Venables had been here his entire career, I think Jalen Redmond plays defensive end his entire career and is that productive at defensive end his entire career. And so now I think there'll be some conversations with some teams of, if we take him, do we want to slim him back down just a little bit and slide him outside? It's not a cut and paste. All 32 teams are looking at you as this is where we're going to play you. Yeah. So that can work for you. It can work against you. Just have to see how that goes. For me, though, these teams get Braden Willis into an interview room, and if someone's not doing their hard, deep digging on Braden Willis yet, and they kind of look at some of his early production and go, where was that? And then he's like, well, look where I was behind. We had the change of offense. Now go watch me block last year. Like, Braden Willis could not come off the field because he was the team's best blocker on the perimeter. He was money over the middle. He showed that athleticism, all that stuff. And Josh, you've talked about this before. Like, you get in a workout setting, Braden Willis is going to flash as well. So the combine is meant for a guy like Braden Willis, who is unbelievable in interviews. He's going to blow these guys away with his football IQ and how he carries himself. He's going to do himself no disservice once the workouts start happening. And I think a lot of teams might circle back and look even harder at his super senior film and go, yeah, that's a guy that might bump up a little bit as someone that with a tight end, you never know if that range is someone falls in love with you in the 5th round, if you're a preferred undrafted free agent coming in, like what that looks like. I think Willis will help himself out a ton.
You know what? The NFL's stupid, though, because people like J.D. Runnels, who did we have just a couple years ago?
Flowers.
Fullback. Flowers. Yeah. Why did he not get in the NFL? Last year before last.
Jeremiah Hall.
Jeremiah Hall, thank you. The NFL hates fullbacks But now, since Gronk especially, they've developed this love affair with tight ends. So a guy like Braden Willis, who began his career as a Lincoln Riley fullback, has evolved into a Jeff Levy tight end, and it's like, oh, we love this guy. You know, they wouldn't touch him if he was still playing fullback, but they love him now because he's going to be a tight end. Football can be stupid sometimes.
Yeah, Braden Willis definitely up there for me as far as just he's not. I've looked at a couple boards. He's not in the top 10 tight ends. He's not even in the top 15 on a lot of boards. He's like somewhere in that 15 to 20 range. So yeah, I mean, go and have a nice combine would be very nice for him to try and get into that conversation and be drafted at all, you know, in the later rounds. And then, you know, why not? Michael Turk. It's hard for a punter to get drafted, but if you go out there and just boot some balls all over the place, he might get picked up in the 5th or 6th round or whatever. It could happen. So big things for Turk, and we'll be keeping an eye on what's going on out there in Indy. OU Pro Day, like we said last week, is not until the 30th, so it's a long way from now. So these guys are going to have a full month, basically, to bounce back, for lack of a better term, if they have a bad combine or build on it or whatever.
Got to perform. They got to perform. They got to go up there and absolutely perform. I remember the story I've told before about Curtis Lofton. He went up there and he was, you know, tested and met the teams and did all this stuff, interviewed day after day after day. He said he got nervous and his body shut down. He didn't use the restroom for 3 days. He didn't relieve himself for 3 days. And then they take him out there and say, okay, now go run a 40. And he ran like a 4.8. Why do you think he ran a 4.8? Because he was constipated. So poor guy, you got to be able to perform under those conditions. That's one of the things that they're looking for.
Well, and remember last year how I know we talked on the last pod about polar opposites. The combine and pro day was boom boom last year, and half the guys didn't participate, and they were kind of just like, my body was still recovering from the combine process. This is going to give Oklahoma's pro day participants a legitimate chance to take what happened in Indy and improve on whatever they need to improve on. And that really wasn't the case last year, which is kind of a bummer for those guys.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Curtis Lofton did back in whatever year that was, 2008. He came home and had an unbelievable pro day, and they were like, yeah, okay, we see that. So Turk, though, I don't think he's going to do it at Lucas Oil Stadium, but when they have their pro day at OU and he's going to punt for scouts in Norman inside the Everest, he's going to punch holes through the Everest. He's going to send balls into orbit through that roof. So look forward to that.
Yeah, last year the pro day was next week. It was right after. So, yeah, very different setup this time around for Oklahoma. So we'll see how that benefits the guys.
By the way, we didn't mention Wanye Morris. So Wanye Morris.
Wanye Morris.
That's all I got. Sorry. I wanted to get his name out there. He's going
to get drafted. So, I mean, he's
for sure.
Yeah. So we'll see what he does out there. He might be someone, you know, you would hope that these teams have learned a little bit from guys like Orlando Brown, who had terrible combines, but it's like you're looking at the wrong things with offensive linemen. I fear that we could have something similar with Wanye, where he runs a brutal 40 or whatever. And it's like, why do you care about how fast your offensive lineman is? That could happen. I don't know.
It's the first 10 yards. Like they should just like fire off the football. What they need to do, the combine doesn't need to be fixed, but they need one of those bar, like the punching bag things. They need that version of that, but you set up like a force thing right in front of the offensive lineman. Let them fire off the football and be like, how many G's did they blow into this bag?
Like
and
the
then
arcade game thing where you punch the
Yeah. So instead of doing the 40, I want to be like, oh my gosh, Wanye Morris used how many pounds of force to blow this thing off the line of scrimmage? That's what I need. And that's the end of Ryan Fixes the Combine. That doesn't
same with the vertical jump. Kind of what's the point? I mean, I know you were measuring explosiveness and all that, but how high you can get with your arm has nothing to do with blocking. I don't know. Maybe it does. Blocking.
There's no way that Trent Williams has ever jumped to his full ability on a football field. There's no scenario where that would ever need to happen. No way.
Have you seen those videos of him where they put him on the flank? They flex him out a little bit, and then he pulls across the back of the formation and just obliterates somebody. It looks like a truck hitting a small car.
Scary.
It looks like like a dump truck or a cement truck or something hitting a small car. It's like, stop! Oh God, no! What?
Yeah, I need the G's on that, please. I need the G's on that hit as well.
Frightening. So we'll see what happens in Indy this week. 7 guys there. We'll be keeping an eye on that for the former Sooners. All right, we'll take a time out here. We'll come back. Other sports. Men's hoops, big win. Might be too little too late. Women's hoops, brutal loss. And we'll also recap the Diamond Sports softball's back at number 1. Talk about that next, right here on the AllSooners Podcast. Final segment of the AllSooners Podcast, episode 176. Send you on your way here. First March pod. We are moving right through spring ball in 3 weeks. Mentioned we talked about the transfers in the last segment. Do want to let you know that there is a new series beginning on AllSooners.com. Transfer Tales. Who's had the first? Is it just a couple or a few additions? I know Angela Anthony went out today. 5. Okay, you've been plugging away on those. So they're available on AllSooners.com. Get to learn about these guys a little bit. A lot more are coming. Who, if you want to dive in a little more, what those are about?
Well, so you guys know, a couple of weeks ago we got access to the players. We got basically 45-minute interviews with a lot of these guys, and this is a telling of their story, telling of how they arrived at the point where they decided to enter the transfer portal, what their first few years at their previous school was like. Maybe you got some family situations in there. You got their relationships with the coaching staff, who they've gravitated to on the football team, on the roster. For instance, Andrew Anthony today was talking about the Stoops thing, Big Brother. I didn't even know about that Big Brother thing until he mentioned it, so that's cool. There's just a lot. And here's the thing. Every one of these 11 players has a different tale, a different story to tell. And so being able to do that, being able to get with these guys and have them talk about themselves, like Brent Venables said, tell them your story. Don't let them tell your story. Tell them what your story is. That's kind of a nice philosophy. So being able to do that is really cool at a point in the year when there's not much football going on.
Yeah. Trace Ford out already. Deshaun McCullough, Jacob Lacey, Reggie Pearson, and Angelo Anthony went out today. So who's been staying busy. We'll have all the transfers up. So keep up with that and learn about these guys a little bit more here over the next few weeks leading up to spring football, starting, like I said before, in 3 weeks from today. All right, we'll shift over to some other sports now. Start with men's hoops. Beat Iowa State on Saturday. Jacob Groves back from the dead. He really needed that. Played well. Got a win over the Cyclones in Ames. I don't know. I mean, is there hope here? I don't think that Oklahoma. Maybe if they went out all the way to the Big 12 championship game and then lost, they could get an at-large. Otherwise, I don't really think an at-large is probably on the table anymore. But it is encouraging to see that they're still playing hard. I think that's probably the biggest thing, to go get a road win like that. I don't know. Probably too little too late, but a nice win for the guys there.
Where do these wins come from? Is my thing.
Yeah, I don't know.
Nobody, and I mean nobody, can figure this team out. Like they don't beat Iowa State on a buzzer beater, half court heave, right? They beat the hell out of them, 61-50. What? In Ames, Iowa. I mean, where did that come from? Just same as the Alabama win, same as the way they beat Kansas State, kind of wire to wire in Lloyd Noble. I don't know. I can't even fathom. It's a testament to Porter Moser keeping things together in the face of everything's falling around you, and you're able to hold up this one wall for a little while, right? That's kind of what he's doing. Things are falling all around him, and he's able to grasp these pieces and say, wait, we can still do this. We can still do this. And let's not forget, yes, the season is probably lost. Yes, they're probably going to finish with a losing record, all that, right? It's a big disappointment in year 2 for Porter Moser. Week to week, game to game, day to day, half to half in college basketball, you compete. And you compete to win, and you compete to do your best, and you compete not to embarrass yourself, and you compete for your teammates, and you compete for your coaches. That's what these guys are doing. They're finding ways deep down inside them to come out and compete and play their ass off. And like we say, we don't know where these are coming from, because they're not a good basketball team. They're not very athletic. They don't just knock the lights out every time they shoot it, right? But they do compete, and you got to admire that at some point, I guess.
I think the wall they're holding up is the culture wall, boss. I think the culture wall is what is being, it's what's remaining in the facility. Now, I actually think it's really simple. Oklahoma has to hit 9 or 10 threes to win a game. They're not good enough in any other aspect of the game to hang. And when they do that, they've won all the games this year except for one, and that's Texas Tech at home. And that's because that's a product of Texas Tech wants to stand 5 defenders with a foot in the paint and says, please shoot the three. Like, you have to shoot the three, and so you have to have a little bit higher volume. Porter Moser's posts or preseason comments about having shot clock guys, there are no rondos on this team, is like more laughable every time they roll out on the floor, because Jacob Grove, like they would kill to have Rajon Rondo on this team. Jacob Groves went the whole conference slate without doing what he did. So yeah, like if this team goes out there and hits 10 threes, they're going to get some upset victories. They're not going to hit 10 threes for 7 straight games or whatever it needs to be to win their last 2 of the regular season. What needs to be 5 games, 6 games to go into Kansas City. So I hope that the team enjoys Fat Joe and Shaq Diesel in Kansas City and motors through all of the food, because otherwise it's just make threes. They'll win a couple of games. Until then, the whole thing is about creating enough buy-in so that you don't have 8 guys at the transfer portal at the end of this season when they go to the NIT.
Do you think coaches like Bill Self, for instance, you think coaches that play against Oklahoma in the Big 12 tournament this year, you think they're going to look at it and go, okay, good, we got Oklahoma in the first round, we're safe? Or are they going to look at it and go, oh, crap, not these guys? Which one of those two is more likely? Because at the end of the day, if they lose, they're shaking their head, they're scratching their head going, what the hell just happened?
Yeah, I think there's fist pumps.
Well, they're the worst team in the Big 12.
Yeah,
and they are.
Everyone knows how to play Tanner Groves, right? Beat the crap out of Grant Sherfield and then hope that a true freshman in Milos Uzan carries the way, especially if Cortez doesn't rejoin the team before ahead of that. Everyone's like, woo, like even Mike Boynton, who is falling off a cliff without Avery Anderson, is going, please give me Oklahoma. Please give me Oklahoma. Dear God, please give me Oklahoma.
You know, Caleb Boone wants that. That's how things would line up right now, is it would be Bedlam in the first round. You know, I asked Porter yesterday, just is he impressed, like who was just saying, with the fact that they are still playing hard? I mean, they went down 14-3 against Iowa State. That is a prime spot to just roll over and die and lose by 30 points. And it looked like that's where things were going. But they battled back, and they dominated the second half, and they won. And, you know, Porter said what he had to say, which is it's not over. These guys don't believe it's over. He said, you know, last time I checked, there's an automatic bid still on the table if we won the Big 12 tournament. These guys are not going to just give up until it's over. So I do give him credit for that, because it would be really easy to give up. It's been a tough season, very tough. It's tough for us. It's draining for us to cover it on a day-to-day. I got to imagine to play in it and to be taking the losses, it's got to be tough. So I do give him credit for that, for continuing to play hard, both the team and for Porter, getting them to rev back up and believe every time. Going to every game truly believing that we're going to win this game today. That's how they play. So give him credit for that. As far as Bijan, you know, Ryan, you mentioned him. He was at the facility yesterday. He was there. He was around. So I don't know if he's back. Porter gave an update, kind of. He said he's welcome back at any time. But, like, they're not rushing him, kind of a thing. So I don't know. He's back around, though. So it seems like he's getting close to back. I don't think he's going to be with the team tonight or anything, but he might be back soon. So we'll see. They could use him, and all help they can get, obviously. Big 12 is very unforgiving, and Big 12 tournament starts next week in Kansas City. We'll see what they do over the next few weeks. I don't think an at-large is on the table, but you never know. They do have a lot of good wins, for what it's worth. A lot of quad one wins for that squad. As for the women,
to get the at-large, they would have to win their last 2. They would have to win 3 in Kansas City, and then lose, obviously, the finals. Is it on the table if they do that? It's a lot of good quad one wins if they do.
I think maybe if you won the next 2 and then won 2 in Kansas City, that might be enough. That gets you to 18 wins. It'd be close. Ryan, what do you think?
We're operating in the realm of fantasy land. This team can't do this. I'm not worried about it.
I haven't stacked wins in a long time. When's the last time
I'm not worried about it.
I need to do some quick research here. When's the last time that they won 2 in a row? We're talking about winning like 6 in a row. When's the last time they won 2 in a row?
Yeah.
Going back in the Wayback Machine here.
Before conference play.
Yeah, it was non-conference.
So they beat Kansas State, but they lost to Kansas the game before that.
Florida and Central Arkansas.
The game before Alabama was a loss. Game before West Virginia was a loss. Yeah, I'm really struggling to find. Yeah, you're right, Hoove. I don't know if you just guessed that or if you were correct
No,
or if you knew
no,
that.
I got the schedule up.
Oh, okay,
Florida
yeah.
and Central
Florida and
Arkansas.
Central Arkansas. Good Lord.
Back-to-back
We're
wins.
talking about winning like 6 in a row. So, yeah, this
So, yeah.
conversation is not worth having. Moving on.
I'm sorry to not. It's bad radio. It's bad podcasting. I'm sorry, but I'm not here to entertain these. It's not happening. You got to win the tournament, and that's not happening.
They are 1-0 in the Octagon of Doom under Porter Moser after being 0 for under Lon.
That's right.
So,
see if that changes tonight.
We're in Porter's month. This is where he thrives. It's March 1st today. This is where he thrives.
Although, did you see the hats that K-State's giving away to the student section tonight? Like, they could welcome in Houston, Alabama, whatever. No one's beating Kansas State tonight with those lavender hats and the script Wildcat.
K-State's got a good look in hoops. Football's good too, but in hoops especially, the lavender, it goes.
My advice to anybody attending the game is don't walk on the south side of that slope. Stay away from it. Don't go on it, no matter
How
what.
glad are you that we don't go to Manhattan in football next year?
Very glad. Very, very glad.
This is the last time in basketball.
The worst media setup there is. Park way over here, walk all the way around the stadium to come in on this side of the football. It's the worst there is. Come on.
How many years in the SEC until a stadium just gets flat out mooned by Hoove because of?
I don't know. Cincinnati might have some potential next year.
At all costs.
Provo.
I will
the
not.
People of Utah may arrest you.
I will not drop trow in Utah. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's like the worst state to do that in. They'll give you the chair.
I know.
In Utah.
No chance.
Shifting over to women.
I get eaten by a mountain lion.
Or a cougar.
Same thing, I think. I think genetically it's the same animal, if I'm not mistaken.
You're right.
Which is really stupid.
AKA Puma.
Yeah, so when Houston and BYU play each other, it's the same. It's the same. Wait, they're both the Cougars. Big 12's got 2 Cougars now. I didn't realize that until just this moment.
You got Cougar battles, and Oklahoma's entering the land of the Tigers. So
right, 3 Tigers in the SEC. Not a lot of originality going on over there. All right, shifting over to women. So, yikes! I mean, this game on Saturday was not good. They played Texas on Saturday. Huge game. Jenny Peronchek, kind of like we were talking about with Bob Stoops earlier, challenged the fans. Said, need to be there. And basically said, like, if we don't have a good crowd, then Oklahoma just doesn't give a crap about women's basketball, essentially is what she said. And OU fans responded. 10,000 people in there, biggest crowd since 2013. And in a very men's basketball against Bedlam fashion, they wasted it. They scored 45 points and they lost by 20 plus, whatever it ended up being. Disappointing, man. This is as brutal of a loss as they've had under Baranchek. Maybe probably the most brutal. That stinks.
Well, they lost by 20 at Texas, and then they come home and you think, well, this is in Norman, right? Get the crowd fired up, friendly rims, all that stuff. They lose by 22. And not only that, but they score the fewest points they've scored since Jenny Baranchek's been here. They average 82 points a game, more than 82 points a game, and they got 45. So Oklahoma's lack of athletic ability, lack of legit post presence, lack of athleticism in the low post for sure was exposed. Texas was just like, let's see what you got. Texas, give credit to Texas. They guarded the perimeter very well. Oklahoma didn't have a lot of open shots. They didn't make any open shots, but they didn't have a lot to take. So that's something that Oklahoma, Jenny Baranchek's probably going to want to address immediately in her recruiting, or has addressed immediately in her recruiting, and that is getting more athletic. You got to get people who can do. Again, we talked about this with the men teams. You got to get people who can guard multiple positions at a high rate of speed, and Texas did that last week. Oklahoma did not.
Yeah, Jenny Baranchek's done a whole lot of good, obviously, with this program since coming in. But this is the undercurrent. Is last year they did the regular season double. They sweeped Baylor. Massive, something this program hadn't done in a really, really long time. And then as they were in the fight for the Big 12 top seed down the stretch, losses at Texas, losses to Iowa State, when they played ranked teams, they usually lost. Then you got to the Big 12 tournament, and they got smoked by Baylor when they were focused, playing really good basketball. Get to the NCAA tournament, all-time bad loss to Notre Dame.
We're all there. It was rough.
Your other good opponent. This year, start looking down that schedule, guys. Utah, a ranked team. I get it. OU's playing on the second night of a back-to-back. Utah wasn't. The score discrepancy does not reflect one team is more tired than the other. One team got run out of the gym. That was Oklahoma. OU lost to Baylor this year early on. Baylor's not the Baylor they were last year, but lost to Baylor in the LNC. Got smoked in Austin, like you mentioned. Really, the only two ranked wins they have this year, they beat an Iowa State team in Norman that lost Soares, their best player, like 2 minutes into that game. And they beat Kansas when Kansas was a hanger-on at the bottom end of the rankings. Kansas is not a top 25 team. And, oh, by the way, OU was way behind in that one, had to come all the way back. Go to Ames, lose, Texas at home. They're doing a great job of beating the teams they should beat. And the problem is it's not close games. There's more blowouts than there are close games against the higher ranked teams that they've played the last 2 years. And so that's got to be what they have to ratchet up here in a couple of games and headed to Kansas City. It's not like a lost cause by any means. I think they've got the talent this year to not get blown out, certainly. But that's got to be what Ginny Bronchek addresses. The style works, but you're headed to the SEC with actual behemoths. There are no national championship contenders in this Big 12 conference. You're headed to the SEC. You got to fix that in a hurry, or it's going to be a lot of beat the bad teams, get absolutely destroyed by South Carolina and LSU.
Yeah, I don't think, outside of winning the Big 12 tournament, we were chit-chatting before. We don't think that a top 16 and having home games is probably on the table for the reasons that Ryan just said. They don't have a lot of wins to really hang your hat on. So we'll see. I mean, if they win out, in the regular season here, win in Kansas City, the whole thing, they probably get a top 4 seed, and will host. But yeah, I got to see if they can do that. And if Texas is in the way right now, that doesn't look good based off the first 2 matchups. Yeah, just extremely disappointing. OU basketball teams and wasting great crowds this year. It's happened. You're trying so hard to get people to go to the LNC, and you've had it happen. Talk about men and women. You've had it happen a few times this year, and you've put out just horrendous performances. That's it. You need the fans there, and you're trying really hard, and you get them. You got to capitalize. And both men and women this year have really, really squandered some big chances to gain some fans, for lack of a better way to describe that. So we'll see what they do. They got Kansas State tonight, just like the men do. So that game's an LNC last home game for a lot of these OU vets, Ani Unusa, Matty Williams, Taylor Robertson, who had great careers. They're going to finish up at home tonight, and we'll see what they can do the rest of the way. Bedlam this weekend, then Big 12 tournament in Kansas City next week. So we're keeping up with them.
OU's 22-5 on the season. Their net ranking right now 36. So not horrible. But
doesn't match up with the record, though. A Power 5 team with only 5 losses, yeah.
Yeah, not where you would. They're behind Columbia, who's 22-4, and they're right there with South Dakota State.
Columbia.
Yeah, and that net ranking is why when the NCAA puts out, it's a new thing that they do their top 16, especially in women, it matters a ton because those are the hosts, basically. Mm-hmm. And that's a reason why Oklahoma's not been in those discussions, because they haven't beat anybody impressive. They just haven't. The Big 12's not as good.
That's right on the edge of a 3 seed.
Yep. So we'll see what we're looking at for them next week. Obviously moving into Kansas City, and then, whenever their bracket comes out, if they're going to be hosting or not. Probably need to win out to do that, like we were just saying there.
All right, is that right? Did I say that right? 3 seed?
Well, the 16 would be, that's your top 4 seeds all the way through.
Right. So you would have – yeah. That's right. What am I thinking? I'm thinking of when you said 16, it made me think 32 would be the 2 seeds, and then no, that's not how it works.
Right? Yeah. The reason the NCAA releases that 16 is because that would be your host sites. That's your 4-1 seeds, 4-2 seeds, 4-3 seeds, 4-4 seeds.
You're thinking you got Diamond Sports on the brain. You're thinking of the way baseball tournaments work.
Yeah. But when and the NCAA uses the net over RPI because they kind of rope it in. And if you're in the 30s and you don't have a ton of wins, I don't know who's going to be in that room pounding the table for Oklahoma needs to be a host unless they win the Big 12 tournament. And they need to win the Big 12 tournament and beat Texas en route. It doesn't need to be Texas gets upset. Baylor crashes out and OU skates through on the lesser than competition because they were fortunate of upsets elsewhere.
Right. So, yeah, we'll see what they do this week. Last week of the regular season for college hoops. March. Great month. Great month.
Can't come fast enough in the state of Oklahoma, am I right?
We're all ready to wrap it up. Let's wrap it up and get to the meat part of Diamond Sports and spring football. I think everybody's ready for that. Speaking of Diamond Sports, let's head over there to wrap up the show. Softball. Jesus. They destroy UCLA. We did the show last week, and we talked about, their first loss, and they fell down to number 2, but we said at the end of that segment, they can get that number 1 ranking right back if they just can beat UCLA this weekend, and they beat them down 14-0 on Sunday in California. I mean, what can you say? I mean, when they're playing as they want to be, or their best, or whatever, nobody can touch them, and that's what you saw on Sunday. They go undefeated out there in California. They're back to number 1. All is right in the world again for Patty Gasso's team.
That was embarrassing if you're UCLA, except for the fact that it was an improvement over the last time they played Oklahoma, which was 15-0 in the College World Series. So UCLA's looking at that going, hey, we did better. We did better. We're on the way up. What an absolute unit Oklahoma softball is right now. It's not even when they play poorly and they don't hit in the clutch and they don't really execute a ton of important pitches at Baylor in a non-conference game at Baylor and they lose 4-3. You're like, oh God, what's happening? But then they turn it around immediately and sweep through the Mary Nutter and beat some good teams, beat some impressive teams, and then flex their muscles against UCLA. It's obscene, guys. This team. I'm not going to eat my hat or anything like that if they don't win the national championship, but I will be absolutely on my back, eyes wide open, floored if they don't win the national title this year.
Yeah, it's going to have to be a group effort in Oklahoma City. They're going to need someone to beat Oklahoma, kind of like the James Madison thing. You need someone to beat them early and then someone else to come through and beat them because, there's no team in the country that can beat them in a 3-game series. I just refuse to believe it based off what we've seen. Because, Sydney Sanders hasn't come online yet. Her splits this year versus what she was last year at Arizona State are night and day. She has so much room to improve. Alina Torres hasn't really even kicked it into high gear. She had a good weekend, but it wasn't even below standard. Kinsey Hansen, she came in and dropped 8 RBIs in her first weekend, 2 home runs against UCLA, but her average, she had productive at bat. She had a ground out that was an RBI. She had a sac fly. But when Kinsey Hansen, if she gets back to 2021 Kinsey Hansen, that's a grounder through the middle. That's a double off the wall that not only scored somebody, but puts her on base. That hasn't happened yet. Jordy Ball is not playing her best softball. There is so much room for this team to improve. And they just beat UCLA into submission. And Alex Storako looked every bit of the star that Hope Troutwine was last year as far as a super senior transfer coming in. Storako had no trouble at all with that UCLA lineup. It was funny. Last year after Oklahoma beat UCLA in game 2, you saw a bunch of UCLA players on TikTok saying, we didn't want to be in Oklahoma City anymore. It's a crappy city, all that stuff. No one was talking about leaving Palm Springs or anything like that. It was just sad. There was not even any coping mechanism. It was just sad from UCLA.
It was perfect because there's always the conversation of unfair advantage, right, for OU to be in Oklahoma City every year. This was in California. This is at 9:30 local in California, which is wild, by the way, that first pitch time. And just an assault, just an absolute, just splattering everywhere.
And yet,
horrible from that.
One of the coaches in the 32-member coaches poll, who votes USA Today, right, Ryan? USA Today coaches poll, NFCA. Somebody voted UCLA number 1 on their ballot. We don't know who.
We did a deep dive.
We looked it up. There's 32 coaches who vote, allegedly. And each one represents a conference. So there's 32 conferences, 32 coaches. Who voted UCLA number 1?
I have a theory.
I have a theory as well. Go ahead.
One of the 32 coaches doesn't have A, Flow Softball, B, the MLP Network, and C, Twitter.com. All 3 of them, one of the 32 coaches is just off all of them.
Wait, they won by how much? Oh, I got to get my vote back. Nope, sorry, too late. Deadline's passed. No, somebody submitted a ballot. They've got it like computerized, like they drag and drop, and it replaces the team above. Something like that happened, and somebody just didn't move UCLA and Oklahoma, didn't swap them. That's all it was.
Or
People are like, there's this conspiracy theory, and this coach hates that coach, and I thought it might be like the football coaches have like 65, and there's like several from the same conference. I thought Patty might have voted her team number 2 to motivate him, right? I would. I'd be smart about it. I'd be like, nobody knows I can do this, so I'm going to do it. Look, there's still a doubter out there who doesn't believe in you. Patty's not like that, of course. She's better than me, but she's not one of the voters. So it's not. Let's take that off the table.
tinfoil hat. Patty has a lot of friends in the profession. She asked one of the other coaches, like, hey, can you still put us at number 2?
Yeah, maybe. I think it is nefarious. I think there's somebody that just – you see this all the time with like the AP poll in college football where it's like Miami at number 9 gets a number 1 vote. They just like get off to being the one person down there like, that's me, and nobody knows it.
I think it's a mistake, and I think it's obvious because the previous 3 weeks OU was the unanimous number 1. So if somebody's got a grudge against Patty or OU or whatever, they didn't 2 weeks ago. So now they do all of a sudden. So
I don't know. We need to get in contact with every coach and grill them until somebody comes clean, because we have to get to the bottom of this. What is the reason that this happened? Is it because it was 9:30 local in California? You're giving UCLA a pass?
Yep.
Body clock, baby. The committee. Here's the okay. Oklahoma has 1 loss to Baylor. UCLA has 1 loss to Oklahoma. Oklahoma is a better loss than Baylor. Therefore, by the math of the College Football Playoff Committee, UCLA is 1. That's a quality loss.
Yeah.
OU's is not a quality loss.
Is Baylor number 1 then?
No.
Transitive properties. Baylor's not the number 1 team in the country.
That's exactly.
They've dropped other games, so we've got a circle of suck situation going on.
What you just said, Ryan, is ridiculous, and that is exactly how the CFP has decided things for a decade now.
Yes.
It's like, oh, well, Alabama, look at their loss. It's like, but that's who they lost to. It's like they put your brain in a pretzel. Everything you know about sports just collapses with that group of people.
Michigan State 2 weeks ago doesn't matter.
Yeah,
doesn't matter.
You play to lose the game. Hello.
Yeah, it's like when Ohio State got in over Penn State that time. And it's like, but Penn State beat Ohio State. They literally played. What are we doing? Expanded playoff. One more year, folks.
Can't wait to argue about number 12 and number 13.
Fire me up. I'm here
it'll be great. It'll be great. But then those teams will just go get ran. So it won't matter in the grand scheme. It won't matter at the end of the day. Wrapping up with some baseball. So they went 2-2 on opening weekend. They went 2-2 to follow it. So they're 4-4 now. But the last 2 games really encouraging. They lost the midweek game to Abilene Christian last week. Then they lost the opener to Rider. They were 2-4, but they won the last 2. They hit. They pitched. They played much better defense. It feels like a corner is being turned offensively. And that's why, personally, and, I shoot you guys straight on this show. We were honest. I am really optimistic about the direction that they're going because they are hitting right now. And mainly the guys who aren't hitting are guys who we know are going to hit. John Spikerman and Jax Nicholas, the returning guys, are the guys who are struggling right now. The new faces are Anthony McKenzie's on-base percentage is like pushing 600. He's been incredible so far. Dakota Harris has been great so far. Bryce Madron's slowly starting to get it going. And the weekend rotation's looking really, really solid. So I think Oklahoma's really close to starting to ramp this thing up, which, again, like we talked about many times, this team was really kind of finding their way until like April last year. So the fact that they're seeming to starting to find a little bit right here as we hit March, there's reasons to be encouraged, I think, for this team. And they got some big games coming up, so we're going to learn more about them here very, very soon. But I think there's reasons for optimism right now with this team.
I don't disagree, Josh. I think the freshman that you mentioned, in terms of a ranking of this recruiting class, this incoming recruiting class, was this one of the more respected classes or more highly ranked classes?
Well, when you loop in like the JUCO kids and stuff, yes, because Skip Johnson always rates the JUCO ranks very, very well, and that's where guys like Bryce Madron came from the JUCO level, things like that. So when you loop that in, yes, it was very highly thought of in terms of that with the portal.
Got a Lamar kid as well again.
Yep, Braxton Doubt hit. The Sunday starter was really, really good. 6
Yep.
dominant innings from him. He's looking solid so far as the Sunday guy. So yeah, no, there's lots of reasons to be excited about what they're doing right now, in my opinion.
Well, and not just that, it felt like we know replacing arms, Skip is going to get those guys firing. Sometimes just takes a little bit to get going. But for me last year, it seemed like with the chaos on the bases, right? The branded chaos, it took a little bit for that group to figure out, okay, what's the line between being really, really aggressive but being smart and being really, really aggressive and maybe getting thrown out in some spots that may be a little reckless just because – and it felt like it took a little bit for those guys to figure out that line. And I wonder how much of that, when you have so many new guys coming in too, is almost a relearning process of we want to put that pressure on, but also – you don't want to do that to an extent where there's kind of miscues and things like that. And I think that that's an element too of it's not just the hitting, like the entire offense that thinking about it more with what you're doing on the base pad. It's not just as simple as get everything straightened out in the batter's box and everything's copacetic and good.
Yeah, and the main thing to keep in mind too is that Skip Johnson's going to always get the pitchers where they need to be. That's his forte, and he's made really good hires with Reggie Willits. You saw what he did last year for the team. And then this year so far, Russell Raley, really good reviews on him so far. And you see the impact it has on these guys at bats and the offense just in general since he brought those guys in. He's made much. I don't want to dump on the hires he made before, but Reggie and Russell Raley have both been really good additions for that program. And so you're seeing that play out. And then as far as the rotation, it's another thing that people just forget last season. I know a lot of people weren't dialed in from February on. Last season, the rotation, I'm not saying this year's rotation is going to end up being as good, but last year, the rotation everybody loved, they all got drafted. At this point in the year, Jake Bennett was not off to a great start. David Sandlin was off to kind of a bad start, and people were wondering, is he going to be like in the rotation all year? And Cade Horton wasn't even starting games yet. He didn't start starting games until middle of April or so. So the rotation being what it has been these first 2 times through, they're further ahead than they were at this point last year. Again, not saying they're going to get to where they were in Omaha, where they were all 3 guys were just dominating, but they're further ahead. At this point last year, they're further ahead with the rotation. So I think there's lots of reasons to be encouraged, and we'll see what they got. Fun game tonight against UT Arlington. They're coached by Clay Van Hook, who of course was on the staff last year in that Omaha run. He left to take the head coaching job at UT Arlington. That's who they play tonight at their place. And then a big weekend in Frisco where they play Ohio State, California, and Mississippi State. And obviously the Mississippi State one is one of the biggest interests there. SEC team that's a perennial tournament team, perennial Omaha resident, things like that. So that's coming up this weekend. Some Power 5 competition. You get to learn a little more about them, this team coming up this week. But the offense seems to be turning a corner, which is what was off to such a slow start, was they weren't scoring runs. Couple of big games. They actually run rolled Ryder. Took a page out of softball's book with a run roll on Sunday. So yeah, reasons to be encouraged there. All right, I think that's it. Any last things?
Don't forget women's gymnastics Friday against they're number 1, of course. Yes. Friday against number 2 ranked Florida at the Lloyd Noble Center, and then next Monday they go to number 4 ranked Michigan up in Ann Arbor. So.
Yes,
I just looked it up. There are 84 teams that compete in women's gymnastics in the country, including University of Alaska. I did not know that.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. No way they travel that much.
Who do they compete against?
Actually, I went on Monday and talked to KJ Kindler and several gymnasts, and I was a little bit of a fish out of water. Not a little bit. I was very much a fish out of water. I'm not very up to speed on all the gymnastics vernacular, but they were all great. Coach Kindler was great. So if you want to hear from them, that's on AllSooners.com. Little gymnastics video for you. We cover it all, man. We got you covered here. We're all up on everything. So that was a new experience for me, but it worked out. Ron, you got any gymnastics intel you want to jump in with?
I've got nothing. I learned about OU was apparently featured in like a women's gymnastics series, like a dramatized series, which was just news to me. I didn't know that the OU licensed out stuff like that for what is it? It's not Bring It On or whatever, but that was my intake, and I'm like, well, when you just curb stop people left, right, and center.
Oh, yeah.
And then like last year when it was supposed to be the unexpected year where it was the national gymnastics spot that had said like you don't have to worry about Oklahoma this year, that Coach Kindler had like printed out after they won the national championship. Yeah, I'm just like, well, when you do that, Netflix is going to come a calling.
100%. Yeah, all the gymnasts who we talked to on Monday, they went to Florida last year, and they all talked about across the board how insane it was. So the crowd was gigantic. It was like you couldn't hear yourself think the entire time. So there's kind of been a little bit of a call to arms again here for OU fans. And OU fans go out for gymnastics. There's not really an issue there. They've set records almost every time out this season. But 1 versus 2, Florida in town. KJ Kindler's hoping for a 10,000-plus type crowd, and she'll probably get it because gymnastics fans are very, very loyal to that program, and rightfully so. They dominate all the time.
I think they had their highest crowd ever for West Virginia was 6,200. So that was last week. And by the way, there are currently four teams from the SEC ranked in the top 10. So guess what? They're good over there in that too.
Yeah, fitting right in that regard is OU in the gymnastics field. So that'll be a nice little fit in for them whenever we get there for that. All right, I think that's it. Any last things?
Got nothing.
Not that I can think of. I think we covered it all.
On to the next one. All right, we'll be back next week, getting ever so close to the start of spring ball, recapping all the latest news on the football front, and, of course, the latest action from men's and women's hoops, softball, baseball, everything else. That's what we do here on AllSooners.com. You can catch that show next week on iTunes, Spotify, Google, iHeart, wherever you get your podcasts. If you have an Amazon-enabled device, just say, Alexa, play the AllSooners podcast. It's also posted on our website, AllSooners.com. Click on the playlist on your phone, your tablet, or your computer, and you can watch all the shows on Who's YouTube page, John Hoover Media, as well. That's it. For Ryan Chapman and John Hoover, I'm Josh Callaway. We'll catch you guys next time.